So we're going to start out this Frankenmerc segment here, because it's pretty much going to be, I'm going to try to keep this all about the motor for right now, although I've got a lot going on with paint and trailer parts, and I'm going to make a whole separate video for that. So I'm going to try to stay focused on the motor at this point. And what I wanted to do in this video was point out what I'm doing and why. I mentioned that in the last video. Okay, obviously Frankenmerc, Frankenstein motor made out of all kinds of different pieces. Alright, terrorizing the neighborhood. Well, I'll tell you why it can terrorize the neighborhood in a minute. So this case here is a stock 1963-64 case. Okay, it's empty right now because it needed to be completely gone through, new bearings and all that, for another motor I own. Now, there is subtle differences, well actually massive differences, between the later model Mercury case that that has let's see, I think it was sometime in the late 70s, maybe early 80s when they came out with this case. It was far more aquadynamic than the early stuff. There's a lot of positives related to it, and I'm going to go into that in a minute. A lot of people say, oh no, you can't, no, that doesn't work, you can't make that work. Well, that's a bunch of bull crap, because I've done it several times and it actually works out really, really well, and the motors seem to run out better. And I'll explain that too. So, obviously they're both gilled, so the water intake is the same. The water pump area is the same. The water pump is the same impeller, but this uses a steel drive shaft, which they rust out and rot out really, really bad in the water pump area. This uses a stainless steel shaft, same spline too, by the way, and it uses a stainless steel shaft that does not rot out. These use a steel prop shaft, and they get rusty and nasty. These use a stainless steel prop shaft, as you can see. Okay, so longevity is already there. Okay, so there's the bolt pattern is exactly the same, identical, the same all the way front to back, but it has a little bit of shaping differences. Like this is the same from here to here, but the skig, this is like a 5-inch wide, or not skig, I'm sorry, cavitation plate. This is a 5-inch wide cavitation plate, and this one is 7. So it really helps with cavitation and trimming the motor up and potential blowout. It just works so much better. Aquadynamically, also, this thing is longer, about 1 inch longer and more pointed than blunt. Okay, so it will cut the water better. Okay, this has no provision whatsoever for a speedometer pickup. This one has a provision for a speedo pickup, so no more bolting crap on the back of a boat. So here is the huge difference between the two. This is a steel shift shaft, and this is a stainless steel shift shaft. Now, look at the difference. This is why people say they won't work. Okay? You can see that the newer style gear case, the shift shaft sticks up much higher than the old stuff. Now, if you got trim and tilt, you obviously don't need reverse lockout, because your trim will hold your motor in place when you put it in reverse. It may tip up slightly, but it will tip up greatly. Plus, it's just a long story short on that whole situation too. Whether you need it or don't need it. Some say, oh yeah, you gotta have reverse lockout. Well, you really don't need it. You got trim and tilt. As long as you're not wrapping on it in reverse, well, who in the hell does that? So what you need to do to make this actually work is you need to cut this shaft off so it's level with this. These are slightly lower, okay? But if you cut it off so it's level with this, it will work just fine. The splines are identically the same. It just, this can't stick up that far. So that's what we will be doing at some point. We'll be taking a crude power tool like a Sawzall and chopping off a 1/2 inch, because that's what it measures out to removing, and that's fine. If you don't do that, it pushes the shift shaft up into the bottom of the carburetor, and it won't go together. The water pump housing is exactly the same, only this one goes straight up into the blower head, and this one goes from here and it goes up and turns and goes to the back, which I can explain that, well, just really quickly by using this, because this is where your water comes. So you got the right down there where you can see the floor, that's where the pump is. Okay, it'll come up and curves back to go into this. Otherwise it follows the drive shaft and goes into the newer style power head straight up. So there's a difference. So you got to use the stuff that's indigenous to this midsection for that part of it. But the water pump itself physically is the same, and the height is the same, and so you're all good to go. Let's see, anything else with this midsection? Not so much. Oh, huge difference, which we need to talk about. Okay, this is pre-tuner. Okay, so basically, as I mentioned before, it just belches the exhaust into this housing, and it flathers around and does whatever, and there's no control to it, which, if you know anything about two-strokes, if you want to make power, you need a tuner pipe. All right, so Mercury eventually figured out. Now I have made tuner pipes and welded them on and did things, but I'm not doing that with this. It'll be fine. Now, when getting back to this, here's the huge difference. This is where the exhaust goes out. This acts as a tail end tuner pipe before it goes down and goes out through the prop. This had the tuner tube that went all the way to the power head, that went down and basically was controlled tuned exhaust, which helped with making horsepower greatly. Now, if you're going to use this, that's great. And you can take this rubber boot out of here. Don't need that. There's a little metal plate underneath that. You can just get rid of that. If you leave this in, the heat will warp this and it'll just fold over, and eventually it will probably blow out and end up stuck down in here, which will restrict your exhaust flow, so just get rid of it. However, as you can see, this is all open, but this is dead-ended. It doesn't go out, doesn't leave. So it forces the exhaust to go through this hole. All right, it back drains through here. This particular one is going to be open to this whole area in here. It has a little place for a water drain, which is fine, but it also has water drain gills put in the side of this. Now, if you don't plug these, when you go on plane, this thing's going to get loud, and it's going to get louder. I actually had a guy that wanted me to cut all these out so the exhaust came out above the cavitation plate, and I told him it was a really bad idea. It's going to be stupid fucking loud. You know, wide open throttle, it's going to sound like a race motor. Well, he goes like, oh great, let's do that. Well, after the local law enforcement told him that his engine was too loud, he found out that was a mistake. But it did sound really cool sitting there idling, you know, bubbling with the exhaust and whatever. But it didn't control the exhaust going out through here. It's down through the prop. It went to the easiest potential way to leave. Now, there's a fireball going on inside here. So also what it did is it burnt the frickin' paint off here. You know, from running wide open, it literally burnt the paint off around the outside edges. Well, he eventually came back and we filled it all in, and so that's how that's going to go. So what I'm going to be doing with this particular motor is I'm going to be filling all these, okay, so that it's going to keep the motor quieter, just for aesthetics and things like that. Unless Tony says otherwise, we're going to keep this, we're going to tame it down. I'll talk to him about it. He'll see this video anyway, and I'll talk to him about this. So that's where this is headed anyway, is to fill these holes. Now another little tech tip is there is multiple gill holes here. Okay, if you're going to be trimming it up and shooting for speed and everything else, there's 8, I believe 8 holes here. Yep, there's 8 holes. Now if you're going to be trimming this up, you're going to be starving these, at least the top 3 holes for sure. You're going to starve them because the water's level's going to be like this. Okay, you know, the splash is a little higher, but if you're going to suck air at above my hand, then you're going to starve the motor and blow it up. So what you do there is you drill and tap all of these on both sides down 3 holes, or 4 if you want to really live on the edge, as you're going to drill and tap those. And in general, it's a good idea, okay, so that it pulls water from the lowest potential point on above the cone. That's the cone. So that's something that we may or may not do. I'm going to talk to Tony about that and see if he wants me to make that case modification. But I will be making a case modification, is I will be knifing these holes. And I'll explain when we get to that point on the other gear case what that means, okay? So these will be a very sharp edge on this side, and it will cut the water, and these will have a little bit more of a pronounced depth. I machine them out and make them more pronounced so it catches the water and forces the water in here. Like I said, I will probably tap and plug the top 3 before I even paint it, so that it just dummies these out. That way, if Tony does trim it up too much, he won't blow the power head, and that's kind of important. At least I'm going to take care of the top 3, so that it's going to create more of a vacuum. So like I said, I'm going to use the dust here. If we're going to trim this up so the motor is, so the prop is going to be riding more on top of the water, we're going to be starving. So if we go straight across here and say our water level is right across here, those top 3 holes are going to suck air. If they're sucking air, they're not sucking water. So super important in a performance scenario. Done enough with the race boats, race motors, so that's just going to probably happen, and we're going to make that modification. Come on, camera, focus. Let's see. The big thing is, well, you're going to notice that obviously this cavitation plate is squared off tail versus a rounded deal, and it is also at least half an inch longer, half to 3/4 of an inch longer than the stock gear case of a 1963-64 motor. Well, 62, 63, 64. 62 would have had the water pickup back here. I've already explained that in another video, and it ran a tube up to the back of the pump. So that's a whole different kettle of fish there. Still has the same shift shaft height, but it just picks up the water different. The big advantage here with the Speedo pickup is I don't have to put holes in the back of Tony's boat. It can pick it up there. Now another thing I do there is I also drill those out slightly bigger on the front of the case, because they always get filled with sand or rocks or something. It plugs them up. So I found out that if you go 1 drill bit size bigger, for some reason it doesn't allow them to fill up so bad. You also get a more accurate speed reading too, for some bizarre reason. But there's huge differences between these cases. You might get a little bit more spray because this comes off, you know, and it catches the bottom of that lower. It's a little bit different how that catches that, and this may spray up a little bit more at mid throttle, so it kind of gives you more of a rooster tail thing going on, you know. But at high speed, most of the gear cases, you know, the water level's below the cavitation plate, so it's really irrelevant. Because this one starts way up here, you know, for directing the water, and this one starts, oh my god, that's at least 2 inches or maybe even 3 inches back further. But again, these were designed with performance in mind. Mercury, everything Mercury did was designed for performance in mind since the get-go. Since they made the first six-cylinder in 1957, it was bigger, badder, faster era. And they did exactly that. As a matter of fact, it took decades before other outboard manufacturers caught up with them. However, Scott and McCullough not only caught up to them, but they were exceeding them. And if you could look at race statistics of like 1961, yeah, you'll clearly see that McCullough was dominating the racing circuit with three-cylinder motors over the six-cylinder Mercury, which I'm sure got Keycafer's blood just boiling. There's a story I could tell, but I won't. About a race in California when he had a shit fit, because in 1961. I think that's all I really wanted to cover on the gear case differences. Why I'm using the Frankenmerc thing is just to go still Frankensteining out here. This is going to get all painted white, just like a 62 would be, not black. So it's all going to be painted white. I'm putting a custom Frankenmerc skig on it that I custom make here, that's embossed with Frankenmerc on both sides of the skig. So that this one's broke off anyway. So that's going to get cut off, and you're going to see that. I know, cat. You're going to see that. I'm going to cut this off, and then I'll weld the new one on. So that's going to happen. That's another reason I built this jig. Okay, because I do a lot of welding in the shop, and I built this jig so I could flip a gear case upside down, and I can weld the skigs on and make sure they're straight when I weld them. So at least for the purpose of tack welding them in place and making sure they're straight, I can easily measure that much better. And that's the other reason for making this as wide as I did, so that all this fits down inside this hole. Or sits on top of it, actually. Mostly it sits on this plain edge here. But, yeah, so it'll sit on this edge. But it sits as wide as it could possibly be without falling through. It'd do the same with this one, but I had multiple things in mind, and I haven't had time to get these cleaned up and get the padding done, because this will be padded. And I found a piece of, you know where I put it, I found a piece of rub rail, boat rub rail. Not sure what boat it came off of, but it's going to be an ideal bumper so that things don't get scratched. I'm going to cut off chunks of this and use double-sided tape, and once this gets painted and dries good, then I'll use that and put that on here so it doesn't scratch my paint, and it'll work out really well. I screwed up when I explained how I built this thing, and you might get to see me do that later, but in this tube, or this piece of angle iron, it's boxed right here, and there is actually another hole that's drilled down below this bolt, so that if I want to, I can remove the bolt from here, put it through the bottom hole in this piece, and then this thing swings away and just hangs here. So I was even thinking about making a lock tool so that it would lock into this, so it would not sag down. I mean, these are pinch, you know, tighten them up and pinch, but you can put enough weight on here and you can move them. Even if it's, unless you use an impact wrench to tighten it, and I think that's major overkill. But that's just another thing that at some point you'll probably see this. I do a lot of engineering. I have for decades. You know, I'm a fabricator, so I dream up stuff to make all the freaking time. So this is it. In the gear case world, this is the beginning of how this is all going to go. And I'm actually going to stop here, and I'm going to add the midsection, remove this. So I've done my explaining of all the I don't know what to say about this. I mean, that passageway, I guess if a guy really wanted to get fancy, you could take and get in here with a die grinder and finish it off, but I really don't think there's going to be any power advantage to doing that. So I think it's a waste of customers' money to even go there. So I don't think we're going to be doing that. But like I said, I'm going to talk to Tony about this, you know, removing these gills. Because otherwise you're going to have the exhaust is going to go to the easiest way to get out of the motor versus forcing it down through here. Well, at wide open throttle, it's probably going to pull most of the exhaust through the prop just out of, you know, vacuum. But it still would be coming out of here, and I just think it'd be a good idea to just shave this or just fill these and dead end it. Then you don't have a potential chance for, you know, overheating the paint and ruining the paint and all that crap. Like I said, the one guy, we cut all that out of there. Man, that thing was loud. Holy shit. It acted like a BP, if you know what those are. Okay? I owned a Super BP, and if you go look through my videos, you can see what a Super BP is. And that thing was loud as hell. But it was fun. Okay, we're 21 minutes. I'm done with this for right now. I'm going to tack on the midsection at some point here for the next segment of all this. I'll tack that on. I got to get cracking on a bunch of stuff because I have a ton of parts to paint now, and I have to get that power head off of this thing today. I have other parts to sandblast. I'm going to end up falling behind here really, really bad. Oh, yeah, I own a cherry picker, so no more sketchy using the car lift thing. It's what I had at the time, and this side of the shop was packed full of stuff, but I will be using my cherry picker to mount that to a boat. Now, I am going to make this comment, and I'll make it again. If you're going to pull a power head, you better have the midsection mounted to something really solid, because they are an absolute bugger to get them to break loose. Those gaskets are really, really seared on there after 50-some years. So you got to wiggle the power head back and forth and crack it loose, and it just works so much better with the cherry picker versus anything else. So we're going to be doing that. We're going to throw that back on the workboat quick and go from there. So that's kind of what's going on here, and I try to keep my total video time at about 30 minutes max. So I know there's a lot of talking, and everybody bitches about, you talk too much, just do the work. Well, you know what? This is teaching too. You can, oh yeah, here's a good shot. You can see how much longer the other gear case is on that end. And then when you get, well, the clamp is in the way, but that's longer on this end. So the whole gear case is longer, more streamlined, cuts the water better, water pickup, actually better pump housing too than the old ones. Pretty similar, but better pump housing. Stainless steel shafts, no corrosion, longevity. It's a win. This particular gear case will get put back on an original engine at some point. I have another shop that has got 20 or 30 gear cases in it to be rebuilt, and I just don't have the time. I'll get to them as needed. So anyway, just going to cut this off here, and I'm going to put a little 1-minute segment in here with the midsection on the other gear case so you can get an idea what that's all about. All right, I'll be back. All right, we're back. After some wrestling, you can see how this gear case works perfectly with this up midsection. Okay, and I'm going to show you what I got a skig I got to weld on, obviously, but and then we're going to run stainless prop on this too, by the way. I think we're going to go with a 19 pitch, possibly 17 pitch. I need to do some math on gear ratio, potential gear ratio changes for what it is, and I just want it to meet the appropriate RPMs of the motor. If you lug them, you kill them. If you overwind them, you kill them. So It's just, you got to be in that sweet spot. But I see this is really scratched to hell, so we won't be using this one. We're going to be throwing that in a dumpster. Let's save these little dudes, but because you always need those. So I didn't realize this had this big gouge in it. So yeah, this is not going to pass tech. For something that don't much matter, you can try to sand and polish this stuff out, but when you can catch them with your fingernail, it's a lot of sanding and polishing. This is stainless. You can do it, but it's a pain in the ass, and I prefer to just grab a better one, considering I have plenty. Now, I'm going to show you what's going on with the shift shaft, and you can see that because that's longer, that this piece stands up too high and it won't work. So that's why you got to cut that off in the gear case, so this piece squats down on here, and we will be fitting all that. This will all go back together. We'll fit it all together and make sure everybody's happy and it shifts like it's supposed to shift, because this actually does. There's forward right there, okay, and there's neutral, and there's reverse. So everybody's happy, and this is going to be just fine. Whoops, went too far. Gotta find neutral again. No, I don't think that's neutral. Yep, that's neutral. Anyway, okay, so obviously this doesn't go here. It goes way over there, but don't care. For the purpose of showing you guys what I go through when I customize these, is I have to modify. I don't modify the shaft. I modify the gear case, the shift shaft, and the gear case to adapt to this piece. The splines are the same. So that's what's going to happen there. And you get some kind of an idea of what that's going to look like, I guess. At least Tony is going to. He gets an eyeful. I mean, I could literally put the wraparound on it and set the top cap on it, and then you'd have this big, huge, tall thing. I might do that just for giggles. I might do that. It's a shock and awe thing, but no power head in it. So yeah, that's another trick too. If you got an empty gear case and you want to make a show motor, you strip everything out of it, leave the prop shaft in it, get rid of the drive shaft, bolt your case stuff together, leave all this hollow, put your wraparound on, tighten it down to the bottom, and then put your top cap on, and then tighten it all together, and you got a dummy motor. I know guys that have done that for display purposes, like in their man caves, to make them super light so they can move them around easily. They're still awkward, but it works. So it's whatever you're into. A lot of people do some pretty crazy man cave stuff. I've got no room to talk. Now, I did want to show this too. All these bolts go up through here. This is the reverse lockout rod from up in here, and that goes like up in there like so. I can totally remove that if I wish to. It's not going to have the other actuator piece on the bottom of this, so it doesn't matter. I could remove that rod entirely because we're not using the reverse lockout. These shocks are being removed. Different bushings are being put in here. Different bushings are going to go on here, and these will have trim cylinders. Now, another thing about them, the trim cylinders, is this shaft that goes through here with trim cylinders is about that much longer, so it bolts all that together. Those are an impossibility to get out of there. They just, oh my God, if you got to remove those, you can be on a press and say a lot of swearing things. You're better off just buy a new shaft and beat the Christmas rush. Even pushing this one out of here is going to suck. I've done enough of these. They get seared in there. This is just this. This shaft goes through this tube, and they get seared in there so bad that you can't get them apart. Can you run a trim cylinder without those? Yes, you can. Because you bolt the trim cylinder is also bolted to the back of the boat, and you can do it that way, but it's so much better It makes it more of a solid deal. Yeah, if you're out gonna race the hell out of it and you're trimming it up for all it's worth, you should probably have that. But if you're just gonna day boater thing, you can get by without it. So I mean, if you're just, you know, if you're not out there pounding the snot out of it every chance you get, Tony, be nice. We'll see what I'm going to do with that, whether I'm going to go to that extreme or not. But I don't know. I can't remember if there's an interference issue with this this stud with the trim cylinder, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah. So I hope this explained a bunch of stuff. I know this ended up long and windy and stuff, but I hope this helped explain what I'm doing with the whole Frankenmerc thing, you know, and how all this, the aquadynamics of everything, and how that's going to work and actually provide better performance for this old motor, and how everything goes together exactly the same from a 62 to an 82 gear case. So it's a 20-year span, and they still bolt together the same way. Just huge changes in performance-based engineering on the case. Moving right along, I'm going to end this here. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that idea I had earlier for shocking out. I guess it's going to be a surprise. But if you like what I'm doing here, like and subscribe to the channel. It all helps. I've got a goal of by the first of the year to have 500 subs. I have 360 at this point, and I'm hoping this marine side is going to pick up a lot of interest for what I do. I've been doing this, as the channel description says, I've been doing this for 50 years, so if it can be done, I probably already did it. So anyway, have a fantastic day. And don't forget to hit that little like thingy and that subscribe thingy. So, have a great day. There you go. Frankenmerc Mockup. How many guys got one of them mounted on their bench? Probably not so many. Anyway, Frankenmerc Scream Saver.